It's the 1980s. Steven Spielberg has the rights to adapt the award-winning novel Schindler's Ark, which provided an unforgiving look into the Jewish experience during World War II. But at this time, Spielberg believed he wasn't fit for such a strong and emotional adaptation. He would go around looking for possible directors for the project. Billy Wilder, Martin Scorsese, Sidney Pollack, and many others were considered for the role. We of course now know that Spielberg years later fought and conquered his inner demons and directed his magnum opus Hook, and also Schindler's List. But why the fuck am I talking about Steven Spielberg? Well, there was one director Spielberg specifically wanted, but refused to do the project, citing it too personal. Having lived through the Holocaust, at that point, he just wasn't ready to put all the pain and suffering on screen. But there was this other book, published just a year after the war had ended, a memoir detailing how an artist had survived through the Holocaust, the ghetto, the death, the alienation, the hunger, the hate. This book was Vladislav Spielman's The Pianist, the extraordinary true story of one man's survival in Warsaw. Who else could adapt it to the screen other than the man who had denied Schindler's List all those years ago? We're talking, of course, about Roman Polanski. The Pianist, 2002. The Pianist memoir was released in Poland back in 1946, but being as it was right after the war, in a devastated Poland, the book didn't really get much traction or recognition. It wasn't until the late 90s that a German re-release started gaining traction. Polanski read the memoirs and was fascinated by the similarities between The Pianist, Spielman's stories, and his own experiences of survival. No glamour or over-dramatization. There were many moments he knew exactly how to translate to the screen and make it look disturbingly truer than anyone else. Polanski needed to direct this. Unexpectedly, shortly after Polanski read the memoirs, the real-life pianist, Vladislav Spielman, died of complications resulting from a stroke. Polanski met with Vladislav's family shortly after to discuss the adaptation. Andrei, Vladislav's son, collaborated with Polanski, giving much information about his father and also about situations not included in the memoirs. Something which would be very helpful for the actor translating the person to the screen. But who was gonna be capable of portraying a person who goes through impossible odds, loses everyone and everything, plays the piano, goes through famine, and looks like a Jewish man in his late 20s stuck in the 1940s? Well, an actor, and many were considered. The incredible Edward Norton, Joseph Fiennes fresh from Shakespeare in Love. No, the star selected would be the relatively unknown Adrian Brody. Brody had already worked in period pieces and had worked with great directors such as Spike Lee and Terrence Malick. But this would be a whole other challenge, one in which Brody would do everything to play an authentic, inspiring, yet not heroic or overly dramatic Spielman. So authentic, Brody went as method as possible, getting rid of his apartment, his possessions, his girlfriend, and isolating himself from friends and family. Oh, and starving himself while learning the piano. And as Brody was delving into The Pianist, Polanski was submerging himself into all kinds of footage from the time, aiming to make the setting of the film as authentic as possible. But the film wasn't only about showing the perseverance of Spielman, it also aimed to show the society of the time. There were good Jews, good Poles, bad Poles, even good Germans, something which was seen rather controversial at the time it was published. To complement this, Polanski wanted a look that felt natural and less glossy, more subtle, looking more in the style of a documentary than a Hollywood movie. For this, he would entrust Polish cinematographer Paul Edelman. Now, I'm not much of a conspiracy guy. With that being said, if we just go down a little rabbit hole very quickly, we go to 1 year before The Pianist came out, 2001. There's this one movie about a 12-year-old Polish Jewish boy named Romek, who escapes the ghetto and hides in the Polish countryside with a Catholic family. I don't know, it sounds like a story we talked about in part 1 that nobody actually watched. Who is the cinematographer? Paul Edelman. Coincidence? Well, apparently so. Polanski had seen Andrei Wajda's Pan Tadeusz and was impressed by his work there. The film aimed to be bold and authentic, with a $35 million budget, which is nowadays a fourth of a Marvel movie, but you know, this was a serious Holocaust drama. A fully European production without an American studio backing it, or any box office draws really. Where have we seen this before? The film premiered in Cannes 2002. Brody, the little man himself, and the rest of the cast awaiting the audience's reaction. And what a reaction it was. Once the movie was over, the crowd erupted with a 10-minute standing ovation for the inspiring tale of Spielman, for the genuine portrayal of Brody, and for the authentic experience Polanski had managed to capture on the screen. The film left Cannes with the Palme d'Or. All around the world, the film started creating a buzz, and as it went releasing country to country, it managed to make around $120 million. And even more than that, it was nominated for 7 categories at the Academy Awards. It fully delivers on what it set out to achieve, a no-nonsense study of survival of the artist. There is a lot of pain and a lot of extraordinary situations, but they never feel over-dramatized. It feels very sincere, if that makes any sense. Brody provides a very genuine and real performance. So real, he said he had trouble reintegrating to society after filming. For this, he became the youngest actor to win an Oscar for a leading role, which would somehow culminate in him joining the Predators franchise. Up to this point, Polanski had been basically working with a different cinematographer for all of his career. After this, Polanski would use Edelman as his cinematographer for literally all his projects up to this day. It did lose Best Picture to Chicago, but now it came time to name the Best Director. On one side, Martin Scorsese, on the other side, Pedro Almodóvar. But this year, it was no contest.
Goes for Roman Polanski.
And who else to present the award but the guy who brought him out of an early retirement? It was like for a moment, the artist Roman Polanski was back. The guy who made Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown had delivered another masterpiece of the 7th art. And then the elephant in the room came in. Or rather, the lack of it. Can you really give an Oscar to a man who is exiled from your country for raping a 13-year-old girl, who has had other victims come out at this point also accusing him of the same thing? Apparently, you can. Anyways, to end this section on a more positive note, I like to think Thomas Kretschmann later reprises his role in Cars 2. And so the universe of The Pianist and Cars is a connected one.
Ein paar Wochen werden Sie wohl noch aushalten müssen. Mehr nicht.
After the success of The Pianist, everybody was wondering, what is Polanski gonna hit us with next? The answer was something very different. Oliver Twist, 2005. With this twist, Polanski is reuniting with Harwood, the Pianist screenwriter. The story of an orphan who escapes his world and travels to London, joining a gang of kid pickpockets trained to steal for their master. Kinda like that one Batman episode. Basing off of Polanski's own experiences as a kid, knowing poverty, homelessness, and loss. Coming off of The Pianist, Polanski was allowed a surprisingly high $50 million budget to adapt the literacy classic. But wait, you might say, didn't he already make a $50 million flop trying to make a kids movie? Well, Hollywood forgives and forgets when it's convenient. The film would stick to realism and period authenticity almost as much as his work in Macbeth, but there was a new challenge. Polanski had never worked with child actors. Never worked with a child protagonist. Who could play Oliver Twist? He auditioned over 1,000 young boys, looking for an Oliver Twist, until he found 11-year-old Barney Clark, of some TV acting experience. Even though the film was being shot in the Czech Republic, the film sets were built incredibly and really added to the atmosphere of the film, making you believe it was 1800 England. There's also some strong British actors added, such as an unrecognizable Mark Strong and an even more unrecognizable Ben Kingsley, who, if you remember, had previously worked with Polanski in Death and the Maiden, where he was easily the best part of that movie. Things seemed rather decent, but there was still one important question looming. Would the hype of The Pianist be enough to distract parents from realizing that the family movie they're about to take their kids to watch was made by a self-admitted child rape? Or would it sink like Polanski's last attempt to make a children's movie? Well, Oliver Twist premiered at the Venice Film Festival to disappointing reactions. The film wasn't bad, but it wasn't a Polanski film. All in all, the film made around $45 million worldwide. So, a flop, but not in the Pirates level. And that is really the best way to describe this movie. It's a little strange, a little dark at times, a little stale, a little controversial, but never as much as Pirates. I really did not enjoy watching Pirates. Oliver Twist, the young Barney Clark, was solid, but he would later retire from acting, not really enjoying the work. But like in Death in the Maiden, Ben Kingsley is easily the best part of the movie, and just steals the show with his performance. He plays this demented mentor / opportunist who, just like Oliver does, you can't really help but have a little compassion for him. Just like in Death in the Maiden, he steals the last scene. A very strangely emotional and dark scene. Just what an actor Ben Kingsley is. But why did Polanski make Oliver Twist? It doesn't make sense. Coming from the Pianist success, he could have easily done whatever he wanted, and he chose to try and make another children's movie. Well, what I didn't mention before is that Polanski and his wife Emanuelle Signer were now parents of two, Morgane and Elvis Polanski, and he wanted to have a film he could watch with his kids. Thus, the departure from his usual work. Despite the reception of Oliver Twist, Polanski still had goodwill carrying over from The Pianist. With this, he planned to make his biggest movie yet, Pompeii, an adaptation of the 2003 novel by the British journalist novelist Robert Harris. Setting Pompeii during the days leading up to the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, an aqueduct engineer investigates mysterious failures with the city's water system. May sound a little bit familiar to Chinatown, no? Funnily enough, Chinatown actually inspired Harris to write Pompeii, and then that came back around to attracting Polanski to the project. It would have been Polanski's biggest movie and the biggest European production with a reported budget of around $130 million. It would have been. It was already a risky project, but a writer's strike and the 2008 financial crisis left the project in the ashes. Years later, Polanski decided to instead adapt a different and less epical Harris novel, The Ghost Rider, 2010. A political thriller based on the novel by Robert Harris, Ewan McGregor is a ghostwriter who gets contacted to rewrite the memoirs of ex-Prime Minister Adam Lang, played by Pierce Brosnan, after the previous writer mysteriously washes up dead at the shore. The film takes place in London and Martha's Vineyard, a US island. Polanski couldn't really go to either, so instead it was mostly shot in German. Just to show you that Polanski still had a lot of power at this time, it would have originally starred Nicolas Cage and Tilda Swinton, but production was postponed and they had to drop out, leading to starring Ewan McGregor, Olivia Williams, John Bernthal, and Pierce fucking Brosnan. Also, most importantly, BMW.
The biggest Hollywood stars and the best BMW cars.
The film faced some controversy, as Pierce Brosnan plays an ex-prime minister who allegedly committed war crimes and made decisions which all benefited the US, very clearly based on the ex-prime minister Tony Blair, who faced a lot of criticism with his decision to join the war in Iraq. But that's nothing. During the post-production, Polanski would get arrested in Zurich airport for the big elephant in the room, and had to work on the film's post-production during house arrest. At this time, there was actually talks between the US and Switzerland for extradition. It is the closest Polanski has ever come to facing justice. But like we already know from Polanski's own filmography, sometimes the bad guy gets away. Anyway, on a budget of $45 million, the film underperformed, making around $60 million, not really breaking even. Quite a blow for a political thriller with such names attached to it. It was, however, critically praised, and it won the Silver Bear for Best Director. I mean, James Bond, Mark Renton, and Shane. I really enjoyed this one. It's a solid story with clever twists and turns, and a really good ambience of paranoia. Midway through the movie, it even started to resemble Chinatown a little. It's pretty immersive and has an excellent mix of Polanski's isolation, Chinatown's political paranoia, with a little bit of the superstitious mixed in to differentiate. And I was really into it until the final act. It kind of fumbles it, I'm not gonna lie. It could have been executed better. Jake Gittes pushed his luck a lot in Chinatown, but the ghost is just unbearably naive at times, like not playing any cards to his chest. The plot really becomes weaker at the end, and the characters start to do some questionable decisions, which is it's really a shame because the rest of the movie is actually pretty smart. It is the one movie out of his filmography where I can say that Polanski overcooked the ending. Well, this and The Ninth Gate, but that movie was just bad all the way. If we say The Ghost Rider was the reincarnation of Chinatown, then this next movie is the reincarnation of Death and the Maiden. Carnage, 2011. An adaptation of the stage play Le Dieu de Carnage, written by the French playwright Yasmine Erdesa, a single location real-time discussion between two couples over the actions of their own kids. The concept is simple, but the relationships and actions portrayed are anything but. The four adults try their best to hold on to their facade of civility while all possessing different conflicting views and morals. Polanski saw the play in Paris and instantly got in touch with Reza to write the screenplay together, which would keep as close to the play as possible. Just like in Death in the Maiden, a dialogue-heavy movie required an excellent task to make it work. Let me tell you, it definitely got it. Jodie Foster, John C. Reilly, Kate Winslet, Christoph Waltz, all seasoned actors, with all but Foster having strong stage acting experience. This was extremely important as the rehearsal and shooting proved to be more of that of a stage play. They had 2 weeks of rehearsals in which they had to learn the entire script as it was a real-time structure. Production took place in Paris. The studio sets carefully designed to feel like a New York City apartment. It was 6 weeks of shooting, with the actors playing in very long takes in order to maintain the rhythm of their performances. Because of the nature of the script, it seemed like an easy movie to make, but it became its own kind of hell. If anything was off continuity, especially performance-wise, it would be very noticeable. Carnage released in 2011 to moderately positive reviews. Most critics and audiences liked it, and it got strong praises for its performances. Kate Winslet and Jodie Foster both got Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress.
Kick the shit out of your son, and I wipe my ass with your human rights!
Wow! Others said it didn't live up to the play, but the fuck am I gonna do? Go watch a play? Financially, it made around $30 million on a production budget of 25. You must be warned, it is a scary watch though. This is Knife in the Water, Cul-de-sac, Death in the Maiden, but now there are 4 characters. It only took 18 feature films. This was a very surprising movie for me. I really fucking enjoyed it. It's very different from his past dark comedies. This doesn't have the Berman-esque feeling of Cul-de-sac, and it's a more straightforward movie. And surprisingly me, the thinking man, the all-knowing media literate, actually found it quite fucking funny. It's 4 great actors talking, and you get to see them dig out these performances from each other as they form alliances between them and, in a way, betray their own partners. It's pretty simple, but the performances really make it land. It's also a very confined space, basically just a hallway and an apartment, which really makes you feel as uncomfortable as the characters being in that space for that long. Death in the Maiden was already pretty stage play-like, but this is an even more confined story. I will say, it's definitely not for everyone. It is one of those movies where nothing happens. Next time you're having dinner and don't know what to watch, I really recommend it.
Don't you tell me about Africa. I know all about suffering in Africa.
I don't doubt it.
Venus in Fur 2013. In 2011, Polanski goes to the theater to see David Ives play Venus in Fur, another stage play taking place in a single location. It's a sort of meta play inside a play feel, where a director is wrapping up a bad day of auditions when a mysterious woman shows up during a storm pleading to be left to audition. Reluctantly, the director lets her go on stage and is mystified by the woman when she plays the role to perfection. Just as the director thinks she's found the answer to his prayers, it seems that the odd actor might actually be hiding other intentions. It is a big step back from Carnage, as now we go from 4, not even back down to 3, but now to 2. We are talking about lust, we're talking about temptation, we're talking about relationship power struggles, hierarchy, and gender roles, and of course corruption. As soon as Polanski saw the play, he not only knew he should adapt it, he also knew who to cast. He contacted David Ives, the playwright, wanting to collaborate on the script, sticking rather closely to the play, but now in French. From the beginning, a big part for Polanski was that he thought his wife Signer would be perfect for the role of Vanda, the actress, and mentioned this as soon as he contacted Ives. But even though Polanski and Ives thought that Signer was perfect for the tortured actress, Signer wasn't actually all that keen on the role or the project as a whole. But when she read the script now in French, she found a new appreciation for it. With Signer casted as Vanda, the actress, Polanski wanted to go more meta and sort of cast himself as a director. Kinda. French actor Mathieu Amalric was to play Thomas the director, and I mean, look at it. It's the same dude. The film premiered in 2013 at the Cannes Film Festival. It didn't win the Palme d'Or, but it got positive reviews. As a chamber piece, 2-character dialogue-heavy film, It made a modest $6 million internationally, on a budget of assumed to be less than 10. The film takes place in a single location with only 2 characters ever on screen. However, phone call from Thomas's wife and the dynamic shifting between Thomas and Banda as they switch roles, and through that also switch roles in dominance, keeps the film from actually dragging that much. Venus in Fur is a constricting, tight personal experience. That being said, a forgettable one. I swear I watched it, I just don't remember that much. Which brings me not only to the next film, but I would actually like to put this whole last part, this very last films of Polanski into that category. I swear I watched them, but I really don't remember. Based on a True Story 2017. Based on a True Story is a movie which, as you might have been able to tell from the title, is in fact based on a novel of the same name by Delphine de Vigan. We follow successful novelist Delphine, played by once again Signer, as she deals with the emotional hangover from her last novel, in which she believes she may have opened up too much of her personal life. Delphine has problems writing a hyped follow-up when she meets Elle, a fan, played by Eva Green, who gets closer and closer to the writer as events unfold. But even though starting things off helpful and friendly, Delphine believes Elle holds nefarious motives. But the film isn't that straightforward. There is more ambiguity and other deeper concepts, particularly doubles and identity theft, like in The Tenant or just previously in Venus in Fur. But would the film be destroyed like The Tenant or positively received like Venus in Fur? The answer is neither. To say it got a lukewarm reception would be being nice, but it didn't really cause outrage like The Tenant did. And it's also not as good as The Tenant. With a budget of around 10 million, it made around 3. Based on a True Story is a film about boundaries. It explores boundaries with your friends, with your partner, with your self-invited roommate who has gone insane and wants to literally replace you, and how when you're a creator with fans, with what you put in your art, with boundaries you set while you're in the process of making your art, and how those same boundaries come back to haunt you. Could this be Polanski's way of saying he regrets opening up his kinks on Venus in Fur? I don't know. Around this time, Samantha Gailey, the first Polanski victim to speak out, would ask a judge to drop the whole case and either pardon Polanski or make it as time served. She still holds up that it wasn't consensual, but that with the whole situation she has actually seen and is still receiving to this day more harm than any justice. Whatever the case, the judge didn't formally pardon Polanski. Other women coming out and saying they had been abused by the director while they were underage playing a big part in that decision. But still, no extradition. An Officer and a Spy 2019. The second collaboration with Robert Harris following The Ghost Rider, a dramatization of the real-life Alfred Dreyfus case, which split France during the late 1800s. French Captain Dreyfus is incarcerated for being a spy, but the grounds of his arrest seem rather irregular to our protagonist, the newly appointed head of the French State Service, Georges Picquart. Picquart believes the trial to have been based on prejudice, with Dreyfus being Jewish, and is quickly convinced Dreyfus is innocent and even knows a real spy, but proving it and getting the French government to go back on their decision is where the conflict lies. An ambitious project departing heavily from his previous 3 films. Now a historical investigation and exploration of bureaucracy and prejudice. The story being an integral piece of French history meant it had to be a French-speaking drama, with a French cast, and although not originally the plan, due to possible extradition on other countries, also shot in France. Top French talent signed on to the film, including Louis Gardel as Dreyfus, Emmanuel Signer as Picquart's love interest, and Jean Dujardin as Picquart, who, if he seems familiar to you, is because you watched him in The Wolf of Wall Street. The film called for a very modest $25-ish million budget, which would become a big challenge. Most of the budget would go to sets, costumes, and props to get this whole era authenticity. Money for anything else was, quite simply put, not there. But how much would these budget constraints hold down the film? Well, J'accuse premiered at the 2019 Venice Film Festival, where it won the Grand Jury Prize and was highly praised. Basically prized as the second best feature film at the festival. But losing the main prize to Joker was the least of its worries. This was 2019 after all. Back in the early 2000s, you could get away with winning an Oscar after doing some heinous shit, but these were different times. A couple years earlier, the Me Too movement began making an impact. As we all know, the Academy banned Harvey Weinstein in 2017, and a year later they would also ban Polanski, just 16 years after giving him an Oscar. Why they didn't kick him out 40 years earlier? But the public backlash did not end there. During the Venice Film Festival, the head of the jury would deny attending a gala in support of the film, feeling uncomfortable with the whole situation. In France, screenings of the film began positively, but quickly turned on its back as protests erupted on theaters playing it, and some other theaters downright refused to actually screen the film. As if that wasn't enough, if you wanted to watch the movie in the US or the UK or Canada, tough fucking luck. No theatrical or even streaming release. At the time, this film really ignited the question of artist versus art, and really affected whatever reputation was left of Polanski, particularly in France, where he still had a lot of artistic support. What about the movie though? How good is the movie? Well, it's actually pretty decent. It's a very intriguing conflict. Picard is a very methodic and strangely likable protagonist. He's not exactly memorable, but he believes in what he stands for and perseveres almost to a fault. I really enjoyed what Dujardin did with the role. The main faults of the film are really the look. There are great costumes and decent sets. The grading though is very fucking dull. Maybe it is supposed to emulate paintings or pictures of the time, but the lack of style visually really hurts the movie a lot. Which is interesting, cause it's Adelman, the same DOP of the last however many films since The Pianist. His style may be minimalistic, but it doesn't look cheap most of the time. Yet, it kinda does on this one. The thing is, the budget didn't allow for any fancy camera tricks or any real set pieces, and you can really feel it. Should the movie have been shadow banned though? Well, with this being a movie about a wrongfully convicted Jewish man staying true to his ideals and persevering, you could see why it's not the smartest idea to release this when the whole world is remembering that, well, you admitted to a 13-year-old. Anyways, this surprisingly brings us to the last movie Polanski has directed till this day. The Palace, 2023. It's December 31st, 1999. There's a lot of talk of the Y2K bug and the end of the world, and somewhere in the Swiss Alps there's this lavish over-the-top hotel, the Palace, where the ultra-rich and the elites will spend their New Year's Eve and ultimately make decisions that will impact the lives of the smaller people, I think. It's a crazy reunion between Polanski and Jerzy Skolomski, who, if you don't know, co-wrote Knife in the Water with him 60 years earlier, Polanski's debut feature film, which if you didn't see part 1, which I know you didn't, you should go and check it out. Anyways, an incredibly decent showing which carried him all the way to make Repulsion and Cul-de-sac. The Palace is a strange movie. Here goes. John Cleese from the Monty Python movies as a decrepit American billionaire married to a young girl of age, celebrating not only New Year's but their 1-year wedding anniversary. Mickey Rourke as basically an impersonation of a certain American president, trying to manipulate bank accounts to get himself richer while people are distracted at the New Year's and the Y2K bug and possible end of the world. There's also Sidney Rowan returning from all that time ago in What, which I actually really hated, but go check out part 1 again. Now returning as an old rich woman with awful plastic surgery, which... oh. Well, if she's cool with it, I guess that's fine. The doctor who did plastic surgery on her, and his wife with Alzheimer's. There's also a marquise whose biggest worry is that her dog isn't shitting as usual. And also a famous retired porn star looking like, well, that one guy from that one movie. Shady Russians carrying invaluable suitcases, a little weird European man, this pair of hotel workers having to deal with random shit, a Russian ambassador, his wife, Mickey Rourke's supposed unknown family, and also a penguin. And I almost forgot, our protagonist, Oliver Monsecchi as Hansueli, the runner of the hotel. As you can tell, this might be an ambitious comedy. Could the team up that made one of the best Polish films all those years ago be able to handle such an intertwined storyline with so many different characters? metaphors and make it funny? No. The film premiered at the Venice Film Festival out of competition, and maybe for a good reason. Critics took two stances. How dare the Venice Film Festival support a monster like Polanski? And how dare the Venice Film Festival support such a shit film? Many calling it out of touch, mean-spirited, and Polanski's worst film. Again, just like in An Officer and a Spy, no American or Canadian or UK release. And as opposed to An Officer and a Spy, which did get good ratings, there's no one calling for this film to be released anywhere. Is it really that bad? Or is there more to it? Is this possibly Polanski's Eyes Wide Shut, telling us that when people think the end of the world is upon us, the elite scourge to an untouchable fortress, to party and degrade those below them, not caring if there's any possibility that the world will in fact collapse? That even in the most uncertain times, the rich will make a play to fuck everyone else just to get richer, no matter the circumstances or the context. That even the wealthiest are too stupid to know they are being taken advantage of, given what they value most, for a look they have convinced themselves is better. That even he who takes advantage of this is also affected by forces outside of his powers. That the old American powerhouse is dead, and its wealth is passed on to others with the aid of external forces. Maybe. But let's put it this way, it's not a very funny film. Half of the movie is a setup for a punchline which ultimately, it just never comes. I laughed twice, and it was at the same fucking joke. John Cleese, man. The score, whack. The acting, mixed. Some small roles are noticeably bad, but I really liked Hansueli. The plot, whack. The CGI, whack. Like, CW bad. The look of this movie, it has this weird shine, which ironically I think was missing a little from An Officer and a Spy. I hate to say this, but it makes it feel like a Disney Channel movie, to be honest. It is funny that while trying to make a movie about how out of touch these people are, it really just shows how out of touch Polanski is. I mean, using Polish taxpayer money to make an over-the-top movie about how over-the-top rich people are, and it fucking sucks. The best way to sum up this movie is that it's like an early Seinfeld episode. Like there's the different storylines building towards something, but you're not quite sure what, and the payoff is not very funny or worth it. I do recommend looking up, however, the last frame of this movie. Is this the worst Polanski movie? I think it has to be there in consideration with Pirates and Che, but that's just my personal opinion. The personal opinion of a man who has watched all 22 Polanski feature films. I do not recommend it. There is some talks that he might make another movie going back to a fully polished production, but I mean, would anyone really pick it up? Is Polanski even in the right state of mind or health to really do it? Is he not washed? I mean, dude is like 90 years old. After going through this whole project's research and watching all 22 features, it's a real bitter feeling. Something interesting to think about is that if Charles Manson had never ordered a hit on his home, maybe Polanski is still this day one of the best regarded directors. Unfortunately, we do not live in that world. He made some great movies, he made some mid-movies, he did some awful movies, but he did do some horrific shit. And strangely enough, you do find a lot of his predicament hypocritically in his work. I mean, there's no better way to explain his situation than if you look at Chinatown. He got away with it. He will never face justice. Should his movies be erased from existence, though? Just think of all the people who are involved in making a movie. We call it a Polanski movie. But what about Mia Farrow getting a divorce to commit to her role in Rosemary's Baby? Or Adrian Brody's crazy transformation for The Pianist, or Robert Towne's perfect screenplay for Chinatown? What about their work and the work of all the crew? I mean, especially before anything came out. What about those movies? Are those free of the Polanski curse? It's also interesting to see how many people didn't give a fuck about it. I mean, people who I'm sure wouldn't work with him today, not because they consider him a terrible person, but because they're scared of getting cancelled. I mean, just look at this. Joker, Guido, Clarice Starling, Han Solo, Mark Renton, Ripley, James Bond, Gandhi, Indiana Jones, Dr. Loomis, Jaws, Rose, Deckard, Ralph, Dr. Schultz, Shane, The Fugitive, Samantha Jones, even the President. These are all your heroes who have worked with Polanski. Most of them having worked with him after he was exiled. Your favorite Hollywood people don't really care. Not enough to refuse to work with a washed at least. So what I'm trying to say is that you can't really take a moral stance unless you completely disconnect from mainstream cinema. In conclusion, everyone is a cunt. And if we believe we can't separate the art from the artist, then the only thing that's left to do is not watch any movies at all.
Boopy, 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 boopy. Boopy, 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 boo. Boopy, 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 boopy. Boopy, 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 boo. Boopy,